A warning to our viewers. What you are about to witness is a completely true story, documented through official police files and courtroom records. The following program contains graphic details and mature themes that some viewers may find deeply disturbing. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. April 13th, 2011. The clock reads exactly 7:42 a.m. in the sleepy, sun-drenched town of Darden. In the bed of a weathered pickup truck, wrapped tightly in a multicolored blanket, lay the motionless body of a 20-year-old nursing student. Her abductors believed she was already gone. They had driven her down to the muddy banks of the Tennessee River, right beneath the looming shadow of the Interstate 40 bridge. Their plan was as gruesome as it was calculated. They intended to gut her body so it would sink to the bottom and never float back to the surface. But as they pulled her limp, lifeless form from the truck bed, something happened that would haunt investigators for the rest of their lives. Holly Bobo moved. She was still breathing. What followed next was not just a cover-up. It was a cold-blooded execution. A single, devastating gunshot was fired directly into the back of her head. But this wasn't just another murder case. This would become one of the most fiercely contested and controversial criminal investigations in the history of Tennessee. A labyrinth of recanted confessions, vanishing witnesses, broken timelines, and a justice system where the truth itself seemed impossible to reach. This is a harrowing chronicle of how a young woman's dream of saving lives became a family's eternal nightmare, and how the relentless pursuit of answers left behind a massive question mark that still haunts the rural landscape of Tennessee today. Welcome to the Shadow Files crime series. Tonight's case will shake you to your absolute core. Before we step into the dark woods of this mystery, take a brief moment to subscribe, drop a like on this video, and let us know in the comments below where you are watching from. And now, we begin. Part 1. The Heartland and the House on the Hill. To truly understand the terror that befell Holly Bobo, you first need to understand the world where it happened. This was rural Tennessee in 2011, a world completely detached from the hyper-connected society we live in today. Darden, population 387. A tiny town where absolutely everybody knew everybody else. A place where your private business was everybody's business, and honestly, nobody minded. This was post-recession America. People were struggling financially. But communities like Darden survived because neighbors still trusted one another. They shared what they had. They watched each other's children. They helped one another survive. This was the deep Bible Belt. Families had lived on the same land for generations. Hunting wasn't just a hobby here. It was a way of life. Seeing men dressed head to toe in camouflage at sunrise was just as normal as attending church on Sunday morning. Back in 2011, smartphones existed, but barely. GPS tracking was primitive. Facebook was still new territory for many small-town families. There were no Ring cameras, no high-definition surveillance systems, no endless digital footprints following every movement. People still left their front doors unlocked. Children walked dirt roads alone, and trust wasn't considered foolish. It was necessary, but that trust was about to be shattered forever. The Bobo family represented everything good about small-town Tennessee. Dana Bobo worked construction, a hard-working father who built a stable life for his family through honest labor. Karen Bobo was fiercely devoted to her children, protective but loving. Their family home sat deep in the Tennessee countryside, surrounded by dense woods stretching for miles in every direction. Holly's grandmother owned neighboring property, where the family regularly hunted. In Decatur County, stepping into the woods was as natural as breathing. The forest was home. Clint Bobo was Holly's younger brother, a typical teenager who loved sleeping late, but who loved his sister even more. And then there was Holly. Holly had dreams far bigger than Darden's 387 residents. She was studying nursing at the University of Tennessee at Martin, commuting daily to classes nearby in Parsons. She wanted to help people, heal the sick, comfort the broken. While many young adults stayed close to home, Holly dreamed of making a real difference in the world. The family was also connected to something larger. Holly's cousin was Whitney Duncan, an up-and-coming country music star, beginning to gain attention in Nashville. But despite the growing fame, the family remained deeply grounded in their small-town values. By all accounts, it was a perfect life until April 13th, 2011, the morning that perfect life transformed into a nightmare. The final morning. Holly Lynn Bobo was born on October 12, 1990. She was the type of person strong communities are built around. Quiet, determined, hardworking. Her closest friends describe her as shy, but incredibly focused. The kind of girl who silently worked twice as hard as everyone else just to achieve her dreams. She loved nursing. Not casually, not temporarily. It was her calling. While many college students were still figuring life out, Holly already knew exactly who she wanted to become. A healer. She woke up every morning with purpose, studying relentlessly for her degree with the kind of dedication professors never forget. Holly was also deeply in love. She had been dating Drew Scott for years. Friends already expected wedding bells in the near future. Drew was respectful, hardworking, and fully supportive of Holly's ambitions. Their relationship was built on trust, family approval, and genuine affection. The bond between Holly and her brother Clint was equally strong. Like most siblings, they argued sometimes, but they fiercely protected one another. April 12, 2011, will become Holly's final normal day alive. She spent it studying for an upcoming nursing exam, talking with friends, living the everyday life of a focused college student preparing for her future. She had absolutely no idea that within 12 hours, her name would dominate national headlines. 4:30 a.m., Holly's alarm clock pierced through the darkness. This wasn't unusual. She regularly woke before sunrise to study. The house remained quiet as her parents prepared for work. Clint stayed asleep. At 7:30 a.m., Holly received a phone call from Drew Scott. He was hunting turkeys in the woods on her grandmother's property. Completely normal. They spoke briefly, likely discussing her exam, making plans for later that evening. Then came 7:42 a.m. Holly placed her final outgoing phone call. 12 minutes. That was the tiny window separating normal life from total chaos. After 7:42, every incoming call and text to Holly's phone went unanswered forever. Dana and Karen had already left for work. Clint remained asleep. Holly should have been gathering her books and preparing for class. Instead, outside the house, something terrible was unfolding. The family dog suddenly exploded into frantic barking. Not playful barking. Not barking at wildlife. This was panic. A warning. A nearby resident later reported hearing a faint scream echoing from the Bobo property. And in that exact moment, nobody yet realized that a predator had already chosen his target. Part 3. The silhouette in the trees. What Clint Bobo saw through his bedroom window would haunt him forever. Around 8 a.m., the barking dogs jolted him awake. Still half asleep, he looked outside toward the detached garage. There, through the morning mist, he saw Holly kneeling on the ground. Standing in front of her was a man dressed entirely in camouflage. The two appeared to be having an intense argument. Holly looked terrified, distraught. The man spoke aggressively while Holly responded emotionally. From his distance inside the house, Clint could barely hear them, but he would never forget the few words he managed to catch. Holly said, "No, why?" Her voice carried confusion, fear, desperation. But Clint made the tragic assumption that would cost investigators precious time. He believed the man was Drew Scott. Drew hunted those woods all the time. Drew wore camouflage constantly. From a distance, it looked like a lover's argument. Moments later, Clint's mother called him. When Clint casually mentioned the argument happening outside, Karen Bobo instantly panicked. Her voice became sharp and terrified. "Clint, that is not Drew. Get a gun and shoot him right now." But it was already too late. By the time Clint grabbed a pistol and looked back outside, he watched Holly disappear into the woods beside the camouflaged stranger. She wasn't being dragged. She walked beside him willingly, perhaps terrified into compliance. Clint sprinted outside screaming for his sister. But the woods had already swallowed them whole. Gone, he ran to the garage area. And there, on the concrete, he found blood. Fresh blood. Holly's blood. Clint immediately called 911, but disaster struck again. Karen Bobo had simultaneously called from another county, causing confusion between emergency dispatch centers. Critical minutes were lost. When deputies finally arrived 10 minutes later, the trail was already growing cold. 9 units attempted tracking Holly's scent into the woods, but the dense Tennessee forest worked against investigators. The dogs quickly lost the trail. There was only one advantage left. Holly's phone was still active. Cell tower pings showed her moving northward, toward Interstate 40. She was being driven away. Fast. Within hours, Decatur County launched the largest search operation in its history. Hundreds of volunteers flooded the area. National media arrived. A beautiful young nursing student had vanished from her own front yard in broad daylight. 2 days later, searchers discovered Holly's lunchbox in the woods near Bible Hill Road. Inside was a sandwich and a small card embroidered with the letter H, a heartbreaking reminder that Holly had packed lunch expecting an ordinary school day. More evidence followed. A receipt, a school note card, tiny clues scattered through the forest. But no Holly. This was 2011. DNA testing took weeks. Cell tracking was primitive. Rural Tennessee had almost no surveillance infrastructure. The technology capable of solving such a case today barely existed then. Investigators soon focused heavily on a local registered sex offender named Terry Britt. He matched Clint's description almost perfectly. Police wiretapped him, searched his property, placed him under surveillance. But despite the suspicion, no definitive evidence emerged. And as days turned into months, a horrifying reality settled over Darden. Holly Bobo had vanished, and her killer was still free. The discovery in the woods. For 3.5 agonizing years, the disappearance of Holly Bobo consumed the state of Tennessee. Investigators chased dozens of suspects. Every promising lead collapsed into another dead end. Every hopeful tip evaporated into nothing. But Dana and Karen Bobo refused to surrender hope. They organized search after search. Volunteers combed endlessly through the woods of Decatur County. Thousands of missing person flyers covered gas stations, restaurants, churches, and highway billboards across Tennessee. The family fought desperately to keep Holly's face alive in the national media. Because as long as people remembered Holly, there was still hope. The case exploded nationwide. America's Most Wanted featured Holly's disappearance repeatedly. Television personalities like Nancy Grace discussed the case constantly. America became captivated by the horrifying mystery of a nursing student vanishing from her own front yard in broad daylight. And strangely, even in tragedy, Holly's disappearance sparked change. Lawmakers pushed new legislation expanding missing person alerts for young adults under 21. The measure would later become known as the Holly Bobo Act. But as 2011 turned into 2012, and 2012 faded into 2013, hope slowly began dying. Search parties became smaller. Media attention faded. The case grew cold, except for Holly's family. They never stopped believing she would somehow come home alive. Then came September 2014. A local man named Larry Stone was deep in the woods searching for wild ginseng root alongside his cousin. It was an ordinary autumn afternoon in northern Decatur County, roughly 20 miles from the Bobo residence. The forest was silent, peaceful, until Stone noticed something strange. An overturned plastic bucket sitting alone among the fallen leaves. Curious, he walked over and kicked it aside. What he saw underneath shattered him completely. A human skull, bleached white from years of exposure, weathered by rain, sunlight, and time. Stone instantly burst into tears. Terrified, he looked toward his cousin and begged, "Please tell me that's fake. Please tell me that's one of those science class skeletons." But deep down, he already knew the truth. After 3.5 years of silence, someone had finally found Holly Bobo. Investigators rushed to secure the scene. As forensic teams searched the area, they uncovered partial skeletal remains scattered across the forest floor. A skull, teeth, ribs, fragments of bone. And then came the devastating forensic discovery that confirmed everyone's worst nightmare. A bullet hole in the back of Holly's skull. Clean, unmistakable. The bullet had entered the rear right side of her head and exited to the left side of her face. Holly hadn't simply disappeared. She had been executed. Nearby, investigators discovered a weathered wallet. Inside, still perfectly legible after years in the wilderness, was Holly's driver's license. The search was officially over. DNA testing later confirmed what the entire state already knew. The remains belonged to Holly Lynn Bobo, the sweet nursing student who vanished into the Tennessee woods on April 13th. 2011 had finally been found, not far from Interstate 40, exactly where her cell phone emitted its final digital pings years earlier. For Dana and Karen Bobo, years of desperate hope collapsed instantly. Their daughter was finally coming home, but not in the way they had prayed for every single night. Now the question changed. No longer, where is Holly? But instead, who killed her? And would they ever face justice? The House of Cards. This is where the investigation takes a deeply disturbing turn. In March of 2014, months before Holly's remains were even discovered, authorities announced a shocking breakthrough. Multiple arrests, kidnapping charges, murder charges. The state claimed they had finally solved the case. But the entire foundation of that breakthrough rested upon one of the most controversial confessions in Tennessee history. It began with a local man named John Dylan Adams. Dylan wasn't a hardened criminal. He was intellectually disabled, a vulnerable young man easily influenced and manipulated under pressure. After being arrested on unrelated weapons charges, investigators interrogated him for hours. Eventually, Dylan gave detectives a statement they had been waiting for. He claimed he saw Holly Bobo alive inside his brother Zach Adams' trailer shortly after the abduction. According to Dylan, Holly sat in a green chair wearing a pink shirt, while local men Zach Adams and Jason Autry stood nearby. Dylan alleged Zach bragged about sexually assaulting Holly and recording it on video. The confession instantly changed everything. Police arrested Zach Adams, Jason Autry, and Shane Austin. But then, the entire story began unraveling. Dylan Adams later recanted everything, every word. He claimed investigators pressured him relentlessly, kept him isolated for hours without food or water, fed him details, corrected his story repeatedly. Eventually, Dylan claimed he broke emotionally and asked detectives, "What do you want me to say?" His family later described watching the interrogation footage in horror. They claimed investigators constantly guided Dylan's answers, correcting timelines, correcting names, correcting details, essentially building the confession for him. But by then, the damage was irreversible. The arrests had already happened. The media frenzy exploded, and prosecutors fully committed themselves to the narrative. Then came the state's bizarre official theory. According to prosecutors, Holly wasn't abducted for robbery, not even primarily for sexual assault. They claimed the suspects originally intended to force Clint Bobo into manufacturing methamphetamine. But when Holly unexpectedly confronted them, they abducted her instead. The prosecution alleged Holly was taken to a barn owned by Shane Austin's grandmother, where she was assaulted. Afterward, the suspects allegedly drove her toward the Tennessee River, intending to dispose of her body. And this is where Jason Autry became the centerpiece of the entire case. Autry agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for a dramatically reduced sentence. On the witness stand, Autry delivered horrifying testimony, detailed, graphic, calmly spoken. He claimed Holly had been wrapped in a multicolored blanket in the bed of a pickup truck. He described driving toward the river beneath Interstate 40. And then, according to Autry, as they removed Holly from the truck, they realized she was still alive. That's when Zach Adams allegedly shot her in the back of the head. The courtroom sat frozen listening to him, because his story sounded believable, too believable. Autry seemed to know intimate details of the crime, details ordinary people shouldn't know. But there was a massive problem. Before testifying, Autry had complete access to police discovery materials, meaning he already knew the forensic evidence, the timelines, the crime scene details. He had months to perfectly tailor his story. And despite all the horrifying testimony, the prosecution still lacked one critical thing: physical evidence. No DNA connected Zach Adams to Holly. No fingerprints. No forensic evidence tied him directly to the murder. Nothing. The state relied heavily on circumstantial evidence. A white pickup truck reportedly seen speeding away from the area. Zach owned a white truck. Former girlfriends testified Zach made disturbing threats comparing women to Holly Bobo. Jailhouse informants claimed Zach made incriminating comments behind bars. Investigators also recovered an Arminius HW5.32 caliber revolver allegedly linked to the murder, but forensic testing failed to conclusively match the gun to Holly's skull wound. No DNA, no fingerprints, nothing definitive. The prosecution also pointed to two papers belonging to Holly discovered near Shane Austin's property, a receipt, and a school note card. But ultimately, the state's entire case rested on Jason Autry. One man, one story, one witness hoping to save himself. And somehow, it was enough. The mirage of justice. September 2017. More than 6 years after Holly vanished into the woods, Zach Adams finally stood trial for murder. The prosecution leaned almost entirely on Jason Autry's testimony. Autry calmly told jurors about Holly's final hours, about the blanket, the truck, the drive to the river, and the fatal gunshot. The defense fought aggressively. They hammered the jury with one overwhelming fact. There was absolutely no physical evidence connecting Zach Adams to Holly Bobo's murder. No DNA, no fingerprints, no forensic proof whatsoever. Even worse for prosecutors, cell phone tower data directly contradicted key portions of Autry's timeline. Defense experts argued the suspects would have needed to drive impossible speeds across winding rural roads to make the timeline physically work. Then came an explosive twist. Former veteran TBI agent Terry Dicus testified for the defense. Dicus stated he originally ruled out these suspects years earlier because their alibis checked out. Even more shocking, cell phone data placed Zach Adams miles away from the Bobo property during the abduction. But despite the contradictions, despite the missing evidence, despite the doubts, the jury reached a verdict. September 22, 2017. Guilty on all charges. Zach Adams received life in prison, without parole plus 50 additional years. The fallout continued. Dylan Adams later accepted an Alford plea to avoid the death penalty while still maintaining innocence. Shane Austin died by suicide before trial. And Jason Autry, the state's star witness, the man whose testimony sealed Zach Adams' fate forever, served only 8 years in prison before walking free in 2020. To the public, the case appeared closed. Justice served. But the story was far from over. Conclusion: 2 faults. January 2024. The Holly Bobo case exploded back into headlines across Tennessee, from inside a federal prison cell on unrelated charges. Jason Autry signed a sworn affidavit, and what he admitted shocked everyone. He confessed that his entire courtroom testimony had been fabricated. Every detail, every story, every horrifying claim, a lie. Autry admitted he simply added Holly to it. He explained that he took an ordinary day from his past and inserted Holly's murder into the timeline, then carefully aligned his story using police discovery files so it would sound authentic. The very testimony that condemned Zach Adams to die in prison was now being disowned by the man who delivered it. Autry admitted he lied for one reason: to save himself. In June 2024, emergency court hearings reopened a nightmare all over again. Holly's exhausted parents sat silently inside the courtroom where they once believed justice had finally been achieved. But now the terrifying question wasn't whether Holly had been murdered. Everyone knew she had. The terrifying question became this: did Tennessee imprison the wrong man while Holly's real killer still walks free? Did the justice system fail Holly Bobo twice? Once by failing to protect her, and again by potentially convicting the wrong suspect? Attention quickly returned to Terry Britt, the registered sex offender who originally matched Clint Bobo's description almost perfectly. Investigators later discovered Britt lied about his alibi. He claimed his wife stayed home helping install a bathtub that morning, but records showed she actually went to work before Britt later called her home. Even more suspicious, the hardware store had no matching bathtub receipt on file. And perhaps most disturbing of all, independent forensic experts stated Terry Britt could not be excluded as the source of an unidentified palm print found on Holly Bobo's vehicle. Yet despite all the controversy, no one else has ever officially been charged. The case exposed terrifying flaws inside the justice system: false confessions, manipulated witnesses, missed evidence, prosecutorial misconduct, immense public pressure to solve a nationally famous case. At one point, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation temporarily withdrew from the case entirely, accusing local prosecutors of misconduct. When vulnerable individuals can be manipulated into false confessions, and circumstantial evidence can potentially send someone to prison for life, the system has failed everyone involved, including Holly, because Holly Bobo was never just another true crime headline. She was a daughter, a sister, a nursing student with dreams of helping people, a young woman who called her mother every single day, a girl who stayed awake late studying over textbooks, preparing for a future she never got the chance to live. Her life was stolen away in the quiet woods of Tennessee, leaving behind a devastated family, a broken community, and a haunting mystery that may never truly be solved. The question still echoes through the forests of Darden to this very day. If Zach Adams didn't kill Holly Bobo, then who did?